I would like to welcome you all to what should be a very informative evening listening to Congressman Jake Auchincloss. My name is Gerry Rovner, and I serve as the president of the Needham Area Immigration Justice Task Force. For those of you who may be unaware of the task force, we are a 501c3 charitable entity made up of nonpartisan and non-denominational members interested in immigration issues. We are supported by donations. Since the pandemic, we meet monthly via Zoom on the second Monday of the month to discuss the issues. Once we will be able to meet again in person, we will return to our regular activities rather than merely talking about the issues. For example, we support Wednesday's Witness that holds a weekly vigil on the Needham Town Common to bring public awareness about the separation of families. In April, we heard from Boston City Councilor Lydia Edwards discuss housing vouchers that are available in the city of Boston. And that was followed up by a presentation by Andy Friedman discussing his entity, Miles for Migrants, which allows people with airline miles to donate them to his organization to be bundled for use by migrants released from detention to travel to family while they are awaiting a hearing before an immigration judge, which could take as long as 2 or 3 and sometimes 4 years. We look forward to getting back into action, where a group of our members participate in what is called an accompanying project that assists immigrants to attend medical appointments, to check in with ICE, or to attend immigration court hearings with them. Others of our members participate in a welcoming event for immigrants, such as a potluck supper for all of us to get to know each other better. Still others are involved in fighting wage theft. After Representative Auchincloss concludes his responses to the Q&As, we will begin our regular business meeting, and I invite all of you to stay tuned and attend. If you're seeking more information about us, you can find us on our website, all one word, immigration, needham.com. A word about tonight. Representative Auchincloss will present some opening remarks, and then he will be taking questions. It is our intent to present the questions in the order that we receive them. If you have a question for him during his presentation, please send it via chat. We probably will not get to all of them. We will also ask you to mute yourself so that we will not be distracted by background noises. I'd also like to welcome our own state representative, Denise Garlick, to our meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Now, does anybody have any questions as to how we're going to proceed? Good. The Q&A should prove very interesting because they will be, according to the list that I have seen, touch upon most of the items that are of concern to so many of us. I think you'll find that you probably have the same questions as have been presented to us in advance as we had requested. One of the major issues, of course, is what's going to happen in the Congress and how this Congress can overcome its problems of just sitting still and doing nothing. So it should be very interesting to hear from the congressman who took his seat just this past January for his first term. The general business meeting that will follow the presentation is going to deal with one of the activities going on here in the town of Needham, which is what's called NUARI, N-U-A-R-I, which is a group appointed by the select board to study and come up with various solutions to problems involving racial equity in the town of Needham. I think I would like to take a minute to thank Karen Price and Bill Okerman for setting up the Zoom meeting. for Renaz Mala and Karen Walker for the outstanding job they did with publicity, and give a special thank you to Mark Mandel from the Needham channel for arranging the broadcast tonight. There we are. Welcome, Congressman.
Thanks for having me.
My name is Gerry Rovner, and I'm the president of this organization. Your staff has been very helpful in helping us put this event together.
Good.
And we are absolutely delighted that you found the time to be able to chat with us about something that's very close to this organization. Those are the immigration issues of the day. I would like to introduce the Congressman at this point. He was born and raised in Newton. He's a graduate of both Harvard and MIT, so he stayed right close to the river. And he earned both his bachelor's at Harvard and an MBA at MIT. After graduating from Harvard, he joined the Marine Corps and has commanded infantry in both Afghanistan and in special operations in Panama. He continues to serve in the Marine Reserves, where he currently holds the rank of Major. Representative Auchincloss commenced his first term in January of this year. It's hard to applaud a welcome on Zoom, Congressman, but we welcome you to our meeting, and again, we are extremely grateful for taking the time to speak to us. Congressman, the floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate you organizing this event. Been looking forward to it over the weekend. And I'll really keep my remarks very brief because you've prepared some superb questions and I want to leave time for us to have a good dialogue. I just want to start by reflecting upon and acknowledging what an incredible difference a year makes. I was able to attend the president's address to the joint session of Congress a couple of weeks ago. I was hidden in the way back in the nosebleeder seats of the House chamber as the freshman, but I was able to be there, and hearing him speak, hearing an American president underline American values caused me to reflect on April of 2020, of a year before, when it was becoming clear, I think, to a lot of us that COVID-19 was not going to be a March problem. It was not going to be an April problem. This was going to be with us for the summer and for the foreseeable future. And perhaps even more distressingly, that we had a president who was temperamentally, politically, constitutionally incapable of meeting the moment, whose, instead of rising to the occasion, was devolving to his worst instincts, to blame foreigners for his own failures, to cast aspersions on science, and to generally vilify the other as opposed to rallying the country together to face this supreme challenge. And now, listening to President Biden, we have somebody who is, one, taking on the pandemic and believes in science, 200 million shots in arms in his first 100 days, but two, expressing the challenge we face as a country in ending the pandemic, not as one that is rooted in xenophobia, but is rooted in us rallying together in common cause, and who indeed is committed to immigration and to resettlement of refugees as not just good for the economy, which it is, not just enriching of our society, which it is, but of deeply, profoundly important for us as a country for reestablishing our identity to ourselves and on the world stage. We are a nation of immigrants. We welcome immigrants and refugees. They make us immeasurably richer. And I am committed to working with this president to ensure that we meet that promise and work to undo the damage of the last 4 years and once again be a beacon for our commitment to be an open and liberal society on the world stage.
Well, I guess it comes to me, I get the chance to ask the first couple of questions. What do you think should be done about the millions of undocumented immigrants that are currently in our country? Do you favor a path for citizenship for them? And if so, could you describe the process that you would recommend?
And before I begin, I do want to acknowledge, and my mistake for missing it, Representative Garlick, who is on the call with us. Denise, wonderful to see you as always. And I apologize if I'm missing any other elected officials, but Denise, you're the one I'm seeing, and it's nice to have you on. I unequivocally support a pathway to citizenship. It's not only the right thing to do, it's frankly the only thing we can do logistically as a country. We absolutely need to create a clear, rules-based path to citizenship. And President Biden's US Citizenship Act is the right way to do it. It makes investments in Central American countries to shore up their homeland security and their economies and societies. It provides a very clear and structured path for TPS holders, for dreamers, for farm workers, and for other undocumented immigrants to get a path to citizenship. It also proactively prevents future abuses of the immigration system by preventing something like religious-based discrimination in immigration processing through the No Ban Act. So President Biden's approach with the US Citizenship Act is the way to go. And it's critical for ensuring that those who are here, many of whom are Americans already in all but formal title, can fully partake in our economy and our society.
In regard to that, do you think it's going to have to be necessary to break out the president's bill into pieces, such as one for DACA, one for temporary protected status, maybe one for farm workers, etc.? And if so, do you think that those could pass as standalone bills in both houses of Congress?
So here would be the order of operations that I would go through. First, before breaking the bill up, I would rather just break the filibuster, because the filibuster, which is a 150-year-old anachronism that has been used repeatedly over the last century and a half to bludgeon civil rights legislation, is now holding up a whole suite of common sense reforms, from gun safety to immigration to LGBT rights to voting rights. And it's far past time that we abolish the filibuster and allow our Senate to operate on a majority rules system, which is the very core of American representative democracy. So that would be my first order. Not my call to make, obviously, but I've been very clear with my Senate colleagues that I think that's what they should do first. Second order would be to see whether the bill as a whole can pass the Senate and get the requisite amount of Republican support, because they, for example, want to see the Farm Workers Modernization Act, even if they don't want to see something like the No Ban Act. And then third, if necessary, if we're not able to use the leverage of some elements that they like to get the 10 votes, yes, to break it up and to try to pass it piecemeal. But really, foundationally, we're not going to get the immigration reforms that this country needs and deserves for so long as 18% of Americans have a veto over legislation by controlling 40% of senators.
What, in your opinion, can the U.S. government do to deal with reducing the flow of immigrants through the southern border, both short-term and long-term?
The president has made big commitments to not just improving the operations and the infrastructure at the southern border, but actually to making investments in the Northern Triangle countries, where so much of the refugee inflow is beginning. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are inheriting not just a broken immigration system, but one that has been intentionally, just almost intentionally deconstructed from within. And it's going to take more than months for them to fix it. And I think we just have to acknowledge that and grant them a little bit of time and space to get things in working order. If you'll excuse me, though, I do actually want to read a couple of notes that I have on this question, because I do think it's important to be specific about the plan here. I was taking notes on a recent briefing we had, and I prepared them for this, because these are important measures that the Biden administration is taking that I support. One is from USAID, $125 million to mitigate the impact of drought, food shortages, and the pandemic in the Northern Triangle countries, to try to create or try to mitigate really the disaster scenarios that so many people are fleeing. Number two is $26 million from the DoD to provide health and education and disaster relief services to people in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. $26 million, by the way, I'll just call out here, in the DoD's budget is not very much money. And I will leave it as an open question for everybody whether those $26 million that we're spending in those three countries has more or less impact than a half of an F-35 fighter jet that would pay for. I know what I think, that we should be spending more of this money on humanitarian aid and diplomacy and less of this money on incredibly expensive fighter jets and improvements to the ICBM that are not necessary. And then finally, the State Department's providing more than $100 million directly to refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced people in the Northern Triangle countries to make them less vulnerable and to create a little bit of a buffer for processing and helping them in their countries of residence before they come to the southern border. So apologies for reading off some of that, but I wanted to get the numbers right. I think it's important.
If the United Nations agreed, would you support the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees conducting initial interviews within the home countries of the Northern Triangle? And then if a person passed the basic interview, then allowed them into the United States to pursue their final claim?
So that's not an issue that I've actually heard before, and I don't know that I have got a fully formed opinion. Maybe you could, what's the opinion of this group on that question?
I don't know that we haven't polled anybody on that. It would be interesting to hear that, and we'll see if some others have some thoughts about that as we go along. We're trying to ask the questions in the pretty much the order in which we received them, because we've been receiving questions since we announced your appearance here tonight.
Gerry, we have a question from Task Force member Will Rico, and he can ask it live.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Congressman Auchincloss, for joining us here. I'm Will Rico, longtime member of the task force and Needham resident. And this is I think it's a follow-on question to answer that you gave, but we spend so much time within this organization advocating for asylum seekers and refugees that sometimes we lose track of that root cause of their migration. And often this root cause includes, interventions by the United States, whether it's the US-backed coup in Honduras in 2009, or endless war, or the use of unilateral sanctions, which by the UN standards are illegal. So my question is basically if there's any hope of moving the Democratic Party out of a pro-intervention mindset that seems to help drive much of this crisis of mass migration.
I think the mass migration and the economic, political, and social travails of the Northern Triangle countries, and indeed much of Central and South America, are multifaceted. They're rooted in a tremendous number of challenges, some endogenous, some exogenous. What I will say is that there is very little appetite, frankly, in either party for interventionism right now. After 2 decades of 2 failed forever wars in the Middle East, cost us $6.4 trillion, tens of thousands of lives. Certainly my generation in the Democratic Party, and I believe most of the Democratic Party broadly, has recognized that military adventurism is a bad approach, and military force in general should be our last resort, and we should be instead funding diplomacy, humanitarian aid, especially public health aid, which has been tremendously effective, for example, in countries in Africa where United States intervention has been very beneficial, and in working together with other countries, both big and small, to prepare for transnational challenges like climate change and pandemics.
Karen, do you have a next question, please?
Yes, I do. Even though most immigration violations are civil in nature and not criminal, should the government provide qualified immigration attorneys to assist foreign nationals appearing before asylum officers and immigration judges?
Yes, and I think we should make immigration courts Article 1 courts as well. I've been in office for 4 months now, and I will tell you the most upsetting meeting I have had to date, and I've had lots of meetings, was with a group of Greater Boston immigration attorneys who described to me what's happened over the last 4 years under Donald Trump, who almost as a matter of policy worked to destroy the professionalism and the rule of law within our immigration system. We've got to rebuild it, but we also have to ensure that it can't happen again. And I think that's moving it to become Article I courts and also creating a right to counsel for immigrants.
The idea that many may not be aware of is under the Trump administration, the Attorney General insisted that each immigration judge handles 700 cases a year to closure. And that's just a complete impossibility.
It is, and that was the idea. It was governance through incompetence. They didn't want immigration, so they tried to break it from within. And we've got to respond with the resources and the support that our immigration system needs to exude professionalism and to uphold the rule of law. I think as a society, we're judged on how well the most vulnerable amongst us can rely on the rule of law to work for them, just as well as it does for the most powerful amongst us. And people seeking asylum, immigrants to this country, should be afforded the full legal protections that any big corporation would get in the trial room.
And many of the people joining us tonight are not members of our organization, and they may be unaware of the fact that the Attorney General is the one that appoints an immigration judge.
That's right.
An immigration judge does not have to appear before Congress.
That's what I mean about making them Article I judges.
Exactly. And immigration judges serve at the pleasure of the Attorney General. He can terminate them at any point in time. Okay, Karen, what's our next question?
The next one, there's some questions about providing assistance to undocumented immigrants. Specifically, please address specifically the absence of federal help for undocumented domestic workers. They have the least voice of any group because they are tempting deportation if they complain too loudly. And then also there's a question about to what extent the federal government should provide for immigrants if they receive, for example, healthcare benefits and schools where ESL is taught, ESL. Maybe that was too much for one question.
Well, I think the common thread here is how much do we want to allow immigration law to intertwine with the rest of the rights and responsibilities that come with being a resident in the United States? Everything from, do you get the $1,400 stimulus check under the American Rescue Plan? Can you unionize? Are you afforded access to Medicaid and Medicare? And my view on this as a matter of principle is someone's immigration standing should be siloed from the rest of their participation in American society and the American economy. They should have access to get driver's licenses. They should be allowed to receive the right to organize. They should have obviously full rights in civil and criminal courts. They should be allowed to access the basic government benefits. That does not mean that we undermine the rule of law that exists within the immigration system, but it should be a separate, their standing there should be separate from their standing elsewhere in civil society and the economy. And this, for example, underpinned my support for Newton's sanctuary city ordinance when I was a city councilor in Newton. There's no reason why Newton police officers or Needham police officers or anybody should be an arm of a federal immigration agency. Those are separate considerations.
I'm sure you're aware that there is legislation pending in the Massachusetts State House that will forbid police officers from acting as immigration officers.
Yep.
Next question, Karen.
Okay. What specifically should the U.S. do about the unaccompanied minors that are currently flooding into our country, including the ones that are already here?
So thankfully, the number of unaccompanied minors has dropped precipitously over the last month, and I think President Biden deserves credit for that. We still do have a challenge in processing them in a fully humane and expeditious way. The U.S. Citizenship Act, which I mentioned earlier, would establish the Central American Refugee Program for Central American children. so that they can apply for refugee status in their home country. And it also establishes an office, the minor program, to reunite children with parents and legal guardians here in the United States. We've got to make further investments in the infrastructure at the border that ensures that kids are not being held in formats that are akin to incarceration. Now, most kids that cross the border are immediately united with a legal guardian or a parent, but those that are not are being held in HHS facilities, and we need to continue to invest and give the Biden administration the latitude that they need and the resources that they need to ensure those kids are being treated with the utmost humanity.
Okay, different kind of question. Should federal law penalize employers who do not use E-Verify to verify employment eligibility of applicants? I understand that Republicans, who are generally in favor of stricter immigration laws, oppose requiring employers to use E-Verify and oppose penalties for non-use of E-Verify.
Yeah, it's not an issue that my policy team and I have worked on together. It hasn't come onto the floor yet for a sponsorship, but I will say as a matter of policy, no, I don't think we want to be cracking down on the use of E-Verify. I think that system has been problematic for Dreamers, for TPS status holders, and for other people who are trying to live in this country, raise their family in this country, earn an honest day's wage in this country. And especially now, frankly, that we've got severe labor shortages, it's really a sort of a solution in search of a problem.
What are your thoughts about how to expedite the processing of the many asylum seekers and refugees at our southern border?
I signed on to a letter recently calling for more appropriations and authorization for audio and video teleconferencing to handle these asylum backlog. That's going to expedite that process, make it more efficient, and hopefully help clear out the backlog faster. But again, we got to also invest in our immigration court and attorney system. It's just, we're inheriting a broken system and we need to re-professionalize it.
To exacerbate everything, the Department of Homeland Security recently published information that indicates that individuals in the Northern Triangle speak 40 different dialects and languages. And without having competent interpreters, that makes it impossible for any kind of valid vetting or interviewing to go on with any kind of logic. And that's something that maybe your team may want to take a look at as well.
Absolutely.
Karen?
Another question. Should undocumented foreign nationals be released with GPS monitors rather than be detained in private-run prisons pending immigration court proceedings, assuming he or she is not a threat to the community?
Again, it's another issue that we haven't dug into it fully with my policy team, but as a matter of sort of first analysis, yes, that makes sense, both from, frankly, from a cost perspective for the U.S. government and a logistics perspective, but also in dealing with people in the most humane manner possible.
Yeah, the cost of keeping somebody in detention in an immigration detention center runs about $300 a day, where a GPS bracelet runs somewhere around $4 to $5 a day. Now, if you've got huge numbers of people being detained, the difference in dollars is huge. That could be better spent in the suggestions that you're making on humanitarian care. Karen?
Okay, this question came from the audience. Can Congress pass a law that clarifies the census status of immigrants, whether documented or not? This was a big issue in the last census. It seems that Congress can state in a law that an inhabitant is someone here, whether legal or not. I think it already does say that, doesn't it?
I think that is currently how we do the census now.
That's how it's interpreted.
Yeah, except the term is a resident, not an inhabitant for the count in the census.
So the issue in the last census was really about whether to ask the question or not. Right? Whether
Yeah, and I think we've seen that unfortunately asking the question suppresses the count of immigrants, both documented and undocumented, because of concerns of being prosecuted. And the goal of the census is not to have any type of color of law to it. It's meant to be a data collection exercise. So anything that I think distorts the data we collect would not be wise.
Okay. Next question. The Boston area, this was submitted in advance. The Boston area has one of the highest rents in the nation. Do you favor the federal government issuing rent vouchers for the first year that would assist a refugee or asylee to get established in the greater Boston area?
I'm on the Financial Services Committee, and housing is my prime focus on that committee. Some of you will remember Barney Frank when he was the representative for the Massachusetts 4th, was chair of financial services, and Barney was a terrific advocate for housing. I hope to walk in those footsteps and really help Massachusetts tackle the housing question holistically. We need to make housing more affordable and accessible for all people, immigrants and native-born Americans. That means the low-income housing tax credit for developers. That means increasing Section 8 and low-income vouchers for tenants and for home buyers. And it also means partnering with the private sector to reduce the cost of housing construction. Cost in materials that has spiked over the last several months, for example, timber in particular, is leading to double-digit increases in the cost per key. All these things are intertwining and are making it more expensive to build. So we really need a holistic approach to housing affordability in this district and in greater Boston. I will say on the point about asylees and refugees, one of Needham's own, Ed Shapiro, has launched a absolutely terrific initiative in conjunction with the Open Society Foundation to work with community partners throughout the country to settle asylees and refugees in their first year here, and have worked with the Biden administration to do that. So Needham should be proud to have someone like Ed who's been working on this for years now and is working to ensure that when people first get here, they have a place to call home.
Should the government pay for mental health counseling to the parents and children separated by the prior administration under its much discredited, quote, zero tolerance policy?
Yes, and I believe, let me just quickly look at the U.S. Citizenship Act. I believe that the U.S. Citizenship Act does provide, yes, it does, medical and psychosocial services for unaccompanied children. This to me is part of our attempts under the Biden administration to repair our moral standing on the world stage. And indeed, as we look in the mirror as a country, our treatment of people at the border was a national disgrace these last 4 years. And helping to make those individuals whole will help us be made whole as a country.
If anyone has any more questions, please put them into the chat. I'm out of questions.
These were tough. You all don't throw softballs.
Well, there's one here, Karen, that I see.
Did I miss one?
That goes, how can the U.S. ensure that the resources sent to the Northern Triangle countries do not go to corrupt leaders of those countries?
Sorry, I missed that one.
I think it's a legitimate question. I would be misplaced if I said that I had 100% confidence that some of that won't happen. Unfortunately, there's a long track record of those in power, of kleptocrats in power, occasionally misallocating the resources. USAID has gotten a lot more sophisticated under the Obama administration in allocating resources, and Samantha Power, who will be the new administrator of USAID, is extremely able operator, and I have confidence that she will put forward the auditing capabilities and the systems that will prevent that to the greatest degree possible. I think knowing that it may happen a little bit is not a reason not to do it. Obviously, we want to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not wasted, but the need is so great and the return on investment is so material that we need to be helping these countries, even if sometimes their leaders don't want to help them.
Yeah, and if you look back at NAFTA 1, that's precisely what happened. The U.S. government was paying to train uh, uh, police agencies to stop some of the gang warfare and some of the corruption. And then along came the prior administration and cut out those dollars that were being sent and keeping people in their home countries by enhancing the economy of those countries. Now, I'll grant you that there's been a problem with pests devastating the crops in those areas. But is there one more question? Because
Yep, one more just came in.
Okay, and then I think that will
I didn't
be,
get to screen it. I'll just read it straight. How should the U.S. prevent countries from dumping people into the U.S.? This is a harsh description, but we had all the controversy over Castro emptying jails and encouraging those who were incarcerated to go to the U.S. That was a huge problem with a lot of finger pointing when some crimes occurred.
Well, I would reject the premise of the question. I don't view it as we're getting people dumped on us. I think we're having people who are looking for a better life, like my great-grandparents did 100 years ago when they were fleeing the pogroms in the Ukraine and came here and started a business and raised a family and were able to feel for themselves the American dream. So do we need to have an orderly application of law at the border? Of course, we need infrastructure and process at the border. But we have people at the border who want to become Americans, who want to raise their kids in America, and I think we should welcome them.
Congressman, I want to thank you for the time that you've given to us and the forthright answers that you've given to us. I'd like to welcome you back anytime you'd like to join us. As I said before you came on screen, we meet the second Monday of the month, and if you have anything you'd like to present to us in the future, please don't hesitate to send us emails. I think you've got most of our email addresses on our board.
Gerry, I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation. These were excellent questions. Hopefully I provided somewhat substantive answers. And my staffer, John Cruz-Olivari, is on the line with me. He's going to put his email in here. And he and I both would love to be kept in the loop about what you all are talking about and to come back and speak with you again shortly. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you again for coming in.
Absolutely. Be well.
And you can see that there's a lot of applause in the background, but we just can't hear it on Zoom. Okay, I think that what we will do at this point is switch gears a bit and go into whether or not the task force would like to adopt and support the Needham Unite Against Racism initiative, NUARE, by taking a look at its vision statement and some of the ideas that they have produced. Now, initially I had sent out the website for all of us to take a look at because it's a little more complicated than just taking a real fast look-see. And hopefully the numerous groups here in Needham that have adopted and support this resolution that was also adopted by the town meeting this past Monday night, a week ago Monday, I should say, that we should take a look at it and probably give some discussion to it. So, having said that, is there anybody that has any comments that they would like to make about the NUARE vision statement and its ideas that they have published?
As Karen Price will say, we looked at that at the league, and the league voted to support it. And it, as far as I'm concerned, any group I'm a member of, I would vote for us to support it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
Well, I think it's very well written, very well thought out, and a great blueprint for the not just the town, but all the organizations in town like ours to follow. And I think it's very important that that there's a list of organizations that are endorsed, that have endorsed or adopted the statements and accompanying documents. And I think it's important that this group be on it.
Since we do everything, are there any other comments that people have?
I had suggested including this organization, that they only specifically send it to some of the town groups, because I think the work that the task force is doing is very important for who we are as a community, not just for reaching the people who are immigrants, but as we take action about policies that affect people throughout the country, we are living out the kind of goals that are there in the New RE statement. And one of the other things that they suggest is that organizations look at how they, if there's anything new that they learn from the statement about what they can do as an organization. And that hasn't come to me from reading it yet, but that's another invitation, not just approving it or supporting it, but how, whether there's anything different that we might do.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? Then seeing no hands being flapped around, and since we do things by consensus rather than formal vote, how many would be in favor of us adopting the vision statement and supporting the work of New RA within the town government? Okay, anybody opposed, please raise their hand.
Are we saying that we are adopting the statement for our organization? Is that what we're saying?
That we are adopting the statement for our organization and
Okay.
will be in support of their vision statement for not only ourselves, but for the town as well, town of Needham as well. And it looks to me like we had 10-0, at least in voting. So I guess we will say we have adopted. Okay, the next thing that I thought would be a good idea to bring up is what I started to talk about before the congressman joined us, and that is with some of the activities that we used to be involved with pre-COVID. And I think now would be the time for us to give some thought to formalizing some of these activities that we did before. So when an opportunity arises and COVID allows us to do it, we can get back into doing things rather than just talking about it. And those are the things about the accompaniment, the idea of supporting the Wednesday's witness on the town common on Wednesday afternoons, and other items that many of us may have done previously, like supporting a refugee group when refugees come in, because as you notice, the president has quadrupled the number of refugee admissions from the previous administration of 9,000. I know the number says 15,000, but the way he previously took a look at it, it really comes out to about 9,000. And now the current President Biden has now adopted a figure of 65,000 refugees coming in. Now, the refugee program has been decimated during the previous administration. It's going to take them some time to get up and running. So it may be that we should do some outreach and see what we could do to help some of the refugee programs that are hopefully going to be resettling people in and around the state of Massachusetts. That's involved Catholic Charities, Jewish Vocational Services, and the Lutheran Group are the three that I'm aware of that have been certified to accept refugees. And it would seem that it would be a good idea for us to begin to do some planning. Cynthia, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I believe a few months ago, we recalled how we had worked very closely with the IINE, which is one of the other groups that's approved for resettling refugees. And that Bev was the one who had originally done research about the groups you mentioned and came forth with that group as the recommendation. And we had Resettle Together. We were a community connected with the International Institute of New England. And the resettling of families is primarily in the Lowell area. They also have an office in New Hampshire, but that's where we did the work over a period of years, and seeing Tavi and other people here who were on that small group that worked together. And Bev said that she would ask where they're at. The problem is reconstituting groups who had pulled back because there weren't the refugees. So we don't know exactly how that's going to look for IINE, but I would hope that that would be our priority group to look into because of our history of having been one of their support groups and for the many things we did during those years.
That may be, but I don't think we've established that they're going to be back in the business of dealing with refugees. They really, since there were no refugees coming, they basically shut down the whole group.
Last I knew, I looked online, there were a lot of things they were doing with immigrants when they didn't have refugees. They continued their programs like ESL and training people in vocations and look online at iine.org.
Yeah, hi Cynthia, sorry to interrupt. And IINE also, like, they assigned a pro bono lawyer for me to help me with the application of the citizenship back in July last year.
But a lot has happened. Are they actually going to be doing refugee placement?
Mm-hmm. As far as I know. Bev said she would look into it. I don't know what she found. I didn't want to take her job when she said she was doing it, so I didn't do it.
Bev couldn't make it here tonight, so then we'll just defer to see if the International Institute will do it. Cynthia, can you make a couple of calls, or Renaz, can you make a couple of calls and find out?
Yes, I have a contact there. I will make a
thank
call.
you.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I will see Cynthia in the email.
We can collaborate. We could work together.
Thank you.
Okay.
Gerry?
Yes, Bill.
So when you gave me the name of your colleague a few weeks ago when I got contacted by someone about Sudan, an asylum seeker, and he mentioned something called the PAIR project.
Yes.
So is that, I don't know if that's something that should be considered as well.
The PAIR project is something that they really require lawyers to be involved with. They don't use very many, if any, lay people, because what they do is they actually take an asylum case and see it through from beginning to end, including the hearings in the immigration court. If we wanted to have some kind of a fundraiser some which way for PAIR, they would certainly like us to do that, I'm sure. They have a major a major banquet every year, or they did. I probably have a virtual that raised a considerable amount of money. And the PAIR project is political asylum. Again, we're so used to using these initials, I've forgotten what it is, but it's basically a political asylum group of well-trained immigration lawyers that then have attorneys that they mentor. So you've got attorneys from some of the biggest law firms in the Boston area who are doing pro bono work under the tutelage and guidance of established immigration attorneys, and everybody does this pro bono. So I don't think that's an organization that we could do very much with as compared to the International Institute or some of the others that are out there. Now, the town of Needham Community Council has opened up their English as a second language program and are looking for volunteers. And that's about a once a week meeting and trying to teach people English as a second language. You don't have to be a teacher to do that. You don't have to speak a foreign language to be able to help them with English as a foreign language class. Anybody have any other ideas?
Well, it's not an idea, Gerry, but just I don't know where we are exactly in the agenda, but given we have some new friends with us this evening, if we have some time for anybody new who wants to ask a question. And also just a special welcome to the new faces joining us this evening.
Well, I see one that I spoke with earlier at your suggestion, Will, and that's Claudia Carroll is joining us for the first time. If
yes, thank
introduce
you.
yourself and say hello.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the warm welcoming. This is great to be with all of you and to see how much all of you care about, immigration and immigrants. And I'm excited to work together in any way I can. So thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, and hope to see you around a lot more often as we get out of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I guess that's about it, other than the fact that our next meeting will contain a election of officers, and I'll be sending out a from the chair email with the process, procedure, and how we'll go about doing this. And if anybody has any other ideas that they want included in that next meeting, which will be our last meeting of the year, please send them to me the Wednesday before we have that meeting so that I can at least get it out in a timely fashion instead of sending things out piecemeal. If you think about it now, you might be able to get it to me in sufficient time so I can get it out. If you're interested in getting my email, which comes out generally every 2 weeks, send me an email or send an email to Will Rico. My email is Gerry with a G, Gerry 80059 at Comcast.net. And we'll make sure you get into the mailing list.
And I put my email in the chat as well.
Okay.
And also, before we adjourn, I don't know if, Diego, did you have anything you wanted to share, any updates from Canasta Solidaria that you want the broader group to know about?
Well, actually, I was going to make a suggestion just in terms of the new folks on, I assume perhaps they can write to maybe anyone who is willing to field questions about other activities of the task force can make their contact information available, and perhaps folks want to share a little bit about what particularly they're interested in so that we can figure out how to slot them into future activities and such. It's always great to have new energy and new interest to help push the group forward.
Okay, I think that's an excellent idea because it's nice to be able to plan ahead a little bit instead of having to respond immediately, which is what usually happens with refugee placement. State Department kindly notifies the agency that we're sending you a family a week from Thursday. And you start running around or the agency starts running around looking for housing, food, shelter, clothing, maybe looking for a job, and it's done almost immediately, and they've got to be prepared in advance. So it would be well if you're interested in helping a refugee who has already been vetted, comes into the United States with a green card, is able to work in the United States immediately. It would be well if you'd be interested in doing that. Again, send me an email or send one to Will and he'll get in touch with me because I think he just put his email address in the chat. Yes, Diego.
Thanks to a number of the faith communities in Needham, CASA continues to operate the food distribution canasta solidaria to 350 families every other week. The packing, we continue to buy in bulk, and a number of single mothers are doing the packing, and that provides them some income as well along the way. We had hoped to actually form a co-op to do it, but that has yet to come together. But we also, I think I mentioned at our last meeting, things came together at just the right moment to get a vaccine clinic going in Framingham. And we have now had 7 clinics and gotten more than 1,000 people vaccinated, at least their first dose, a few of them the second. Yeah, and they don't have to go to Gillette or whatever. I mean, back when that was still the only way to get it done. We just found out today that Milford didn't have the same sort of special access to vaccine supply, is willing to do a clinic as well. So on the 22nd, along with the distribution of food, we're expecting to vaccinate another couple hundred. And I guess the last little bit of news is, I think there are, not to lure anyone away from other English programs, but CASA's ELL program just notified me today that they're closing down for the summer, but then in September they're going to start up again, mostly targeting their work to injured workers. So one-on-one tutoring of injured workers for whom it's also a social outlet, because they're often holed up in their apartments and really isolated. So that's CASA's news for the moment.
Diego, where is the clinic, the vaccine clinic? Where is it being held? At your organization?
Yeah, which is quite something when it's more than 200 people at a time. If anybody's ever been in CASA's office, it's how you social distance under those circumstances is a challenge. But we've made it work. It's been amazing. It's been
right.
And everybody has been. I mean, it's been a way for people to get to know CASA and who didn't before too. So that's been really fun.
Can you say where CASA is, and that it's for people who are doing Worker Center in Framingham, so forth?
Sure, real quickly. We're based in downtown Framingham, not just a half block from City Hall, up on a second floor arcade, and we kind of just expand out into the hall when we're vaccinating. We just haul all the chairs out there so that people can be under observation for 15 minutes after they've had their vaccine. We've been distributing, the canasta has been distributing out of the Philadelphia Baptist Church in Framingham and out of St. Mary of the Assumption in Milford. And another time we'll bring you up. Well, I hope I will have news for you that we have finally settled the Mass Avenue wage theft case that Carolyn and Bill were both witness to and supporting of the workers there a year and a half ago when they were pushing to get themselves paid.
Go ahead, Karen.
So did you say that the Community Council is starting up their ELL program again?
The Community Council, yeah.
Okay. And Diego, you just said that CASA is starting it up again in the fall? Yeah. That can that go out in one of your newsletters, Gerry? Because I think, not just the people here, I think your wider audience might be interested in doing those things.
Sure, I could put it in again. I had put it in twice before as soon as I got an email from them.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to put it in a third time. And I really appreciate the fact that the Needham channel has hopefully recorded and will be broadcasting the session with the congressman. He, for a guy that had just started in the Congress in January, seemed to have a reasonably good hold on some of the issues. I will probably be writing an email to him because I think he was skating on a couple of issues, and one of them was E-Verify, which, by the way, allows an employer to send an email to the government and verify the identity and the work authority of the individual. Because somebody asked the question, can't we do something about undocumented workers and find the employer? If the employer uses E-Verify, it's a safe harbor for him. But in any event, I won't go into the weeds of E-Verify because it does have a lot of problems. It had a lot of misinformation, misspellings of names. And if Bill spelled his name B-E-L-L instead of B-I-L-L, and whoever data entered the information put down the wrong name, and then he came to work for me and I put in the E-Verify request, it would come back wrong. So they've got to straighten part of those issues out. All right, now I'll do my favorite thing and say, unless there's any more comments that people have, I think we can adjourn for the evening. At which point, usually I get 6 or 7 hands immediately raised up and say, by the way, so who's going to be the first 7? Come on.
Maybe have a summary of the activities that you do. How can people get involved? So as I have 2 kids and full-time job, I would like to know and to learn more about it so I can have an idea how I better can help the organization. So that would be wonderful. I was just looking at the CASA website and it's amazing. So I'm like, I would love to help with something like that. So anyway, if you can put something like this together, that would be great.
I could try to do that. I'll ask Bill and Karen.
Well, there's quite a bit of information on our website.
All right, I will also check the website. Thank you, Karen, for mentioning that.
That Claudia might like to get on the mailing list, and then you get the minutes, so that's.
Yes, I have her on the
We'll tell you
mailing
what
list.
we're doing more. The website's a more general thing, but the minutes from the meeting.
Claudia is already on the email list. So.
Yay!
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, Gerry and Will are on it, so I am already in there. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else have any suggestions for us? Well, thank you all for attending both parts of this.
Nice.
Thanks, Gerry. Great job.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
So
Good
much.
night.
Great
Yeah,
to
this
meet
was
you
great.
all.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Stay well, everybody.